Welcome to Books in the Biz, the show where real-world business meets real-world results. Hosted by business strategist Dan Paulson and veteran CFO Richard Beltry, this podcast breaks down the stories, trends, and financial insights shaping today's companies. Dan brings decades of experience helping leaders simplify operations, build strong cultures, and scale with confidence. Rich adds his deep financial expertise from guiding organizations across healthcare, construction, logistics, and professional services. Together, they dig into what's really happening behind the numbers and what it means for owners, executives, and anyone trying to grow a stronger, smarter business. This is practical conversation, real talk, and tools you can use right now. Welcome to Books in the Biz.
Hello, welcome back, everybody. Rich, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Dan?
I am doing wonderful. Jay Goninen, welcome back.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, Jay Goninen from Wrenchway. For those of you who have been following the podcast, you've been on before talking to us about what's happening in the automotive world. And I talked with you this last week and told you we were talking about some interesting topics related to you. So to debrief you a little bit more and help out anyone who didn't see last week's, we brought up that Ford is complaining that they're about 5,000 people short of auto techs, and they're willing to pay upwards of $140,000 to $160,000. And now I've also learned in some of the other stuff I've read that they're even willing to help pay for tools. They're willing to help pay for education, the whole bit. And as we were talking last week, your name kept coming up. So I thought, hey.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but
well,
I'm here.
It is good because you probably know more about this crap than we do. So we thought we'd bring you in. And I think, this is a problem that we see not only in the automotive industry, but in the construction industry, in the manufacturing industry. We're seeing a lot of these companies that are looking for talent, having trouble finding that talent, and willing to pay heavily, plus provide, different bonuses and incentives. And I remember talking to you in the past where you had mentioned that you even knew of certain companies that were looking to pay for things like tools and whatnot. You can maybe go into the detail of why that's important, especially for an auto tech person who, after their training's done, what's the first thing they do type thing. So, share your experience, share what you're hearing on this, and we can talk further about it.
Well, this is something that's been many years in the making, right? I started my company 9 years ago now, and it was because we were struggling to find techs back then, right? And it's really been that way for several decades at this point. And it has been one of those challenges where I think a lot of people in our industry aren't on the same page, right? Maybe we don't have a good feeling or a good sense as to what a good technician is actually looking for. I know from our Wrenchway side, we just I'm wearing an ASE hat. Actually, we just launched a program called ASE Connects. That's ASE driven, and a big component of that is data. Because ultimately, when we look at it, there's some disconnect that maybe we've identified, maybe we haven't identified, or truly trying to get a sense of what does make a good, talented technician happy, and knowing that it's not all encompassing, right? Just because you make one technician happy and the bay next to them, that person might not be happy for whatever reason. And so at some level, it's kind of a moving target. I think pay was and still is a primary factor for that, along with some of the issues with barriers to entry, right? You look at tools and how much money a lot of these technicians have in tools in our industry, and it's crazy. I mean, it's not foreign to see a technician have upward of $100,000 worth of tools in their bay that they personally bought. And so, I think some of it is that there are some significant costs to being in our industry in general to
Hmm.
be able to do that. And I do see some shops that are starting to adapt, like you're talking about, where they're providing tools. Even at our local family shop, with a new technician, we had a new technician start 6 months ago, and we provided the toolbox and the basic tools to get him on his feet. And I think for me, that's where industry could do such a better job, is listening to their people and actually listening to understand and not listening to answer, right? Like listening to
Sure.
truly understand what it is that they're wanting. And in this case, a lot of times we have a high level of attrition with young technicians coming into the field, right? And a lot of it is we're trying to get them into production as fast as possible. We're trying to get them to produce as fast as humanly possible. Well, a lot of times that causes a young technician, the expectations of a young technician to be too high, and ultimately leads to the attrition rate. So, one of my, I say that because one of my thinkings here is that we could do a better job as an industry at helping them avoid some of those barriers, helping them avoid, hopefully you don't have any Snap-on guys listening, but like having them, have as a 18-year-old not going on the Snap-on truck and getting themselves into a weekly payment plan, which a lot of them do, and that causes some heartburn when maybe they don't understand how to budget yet, right? Or they're
Right.
not good at managing their life. So for me, when we talk about listening, it is kind of understanding their family situations. If you are a technician or any person really that has a young family, you probably have more family obligations to attend to. I know for myself, my son's in hockey, my son's in basketball, and I have made it a point to try and be at all of the things, right? So it has changed in that way. I don't think when I was growing up, I don't think my dad would prioritize work over that, right? So then kind of like I'm almost the opposite of I'm going to make sure I'm there. I have a limited time with my son. I want to make sure I'm there for him. So ultimately, with all of that, it's to say I think we could do a better job at listening to what the technicians are trying to say and fully being aware that sometimes they don't know what is going to make them happy, right? Like we have to do some different things and some fun things, and pay is the start of everything, but then you start to look at some of those ancillary benefits and things that could make them happier, and you have to have an open mind. I think there's a lot of different ways you could go with that.
No, those are all good points. I'm going to turn it over to Rich here, but before I do, I got one thing I need you to add, because I occasionally scold Rich for this too. ASE is what, for those people who are not automotively driven? Like the rest of us?
Yeah. So ASE is the association in which our industry really credentials technicians, right? So if you go and listen to a say a commercial, a radio commercial, you'll hear it at times. You'll get a certified work done by an ASE certified technician. That is almost like what a bar exam is to a lawyer, right? Like you're
Sure.
taking these exams to be able to license yourself, which isn't required, by the way. And it drives me crazy. We have this shortage, and so you're kind of battling from behind here. But the certifications are not required to work on a car, and I constantly say it blows my mind that it takes more credentialing to do some other jobs that don't require somebody getting into a car that could potentially endanger their life if they don't have a qualified person working on it. So, yes, great question. And the
Good.
National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence is the actual acronym.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Rich, what do you got?
Yeah. You said this has been going on for a while, and I think last week's conversation we did a lot of talking about, policy was created a long time ago. It was where everybody talked about getting a college education, got to get a college education, got to get a college education. So everybody went that route of we're going to get a college education. And so it kind of shunned or put a shadow over the trades, over doing, physical work, doing something different. And now it's come full circle because everybody's going to get college degrees and there's not enough college jobs maybe for those directions that they're going in, or as I keep getting told, my job's going to AI. So I think that was part of the conversation. Do you see the same kind of trend if you go back a little further? I think you mentioned, that you started your company 9 years ago. Maybe it was a trend before that that even led you to say, we need this company here. Like this needs to be involved. Just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So 100% agree. There has been more of an emphasis on the trades. I know, Dan, I showed you this, but next on my desk, I have the America's Talent Strategy report that I've read through several times now. And it is through really the Trump administration talking through how concerned they are with this AI avalanche of potentially taking jobs. And I think when you look at that, they are talking in this report about reskilling people and how you're going to get people into the right positions. Do I think it'll take every position? No, but I do think it's going to really change the way we work as a whole. And if you look at some of these tech companies that are laying people off in the masses right now, I've had several friends reach out that have very high paying jobs that were recently let go. And it's heartbreaking to see, because now you've got a lot of highly educated people with maybe no place to go. And I look at marketing for an example, and how much AI can help with marketing, whether it's the actual design or the analytics behind marketing, or just it's all encompassing. It's freaky to see what AI can do right now. And the crazy part about AI is it's just building on itself over and over and over again. So, I think it learns at a level that's so much faster than any human being could ever learn. And so that's where I think the re-emphasis on the skilled trades has come into play. I didn't see this 10 years ago, this emphasis on the skilled trades. And that was ultimately why I started the first company, was because there was just a lack of attention to it. Now, I do think we're getting more and more attention in the education systems. I do think we still fight a lot of administrative issues at times where maybe the administration doesn't fully understand the skilled trades and the opportunities that are available in the skilled trades. And so I look at it as an opportunity for any industry, not only automotive, but if you're an electrician or a plumber or whatever you are, get those administrators out to see your business, get them to really see what it looks and feels like. It's changed a lot over the years. And Dan, you've been down at our shop.
Yep.
The technology that goes into it now, it's not just kind of what we always referred to as the grease monkey. It's very advanced, right? Like it is a lot of computer work. We're commonly using a scope at our shop. It's changed. The whole thing has changed. And I think the people freaking out about AI, I think we do have to adapt at some level. But I also think it is exciting for the skilled trades as a whole, because you are starting to see more opportunities. And frankly, they're being paid better than they ever had before. I think they're getting a lot more attention than they ever did before. And there are some crazy talented people out there. So it's fun for me to see them finally get a light shine on them.
Yeah, I think you bring up some good points there. And I appreciate you mentioning it's not just automotive, because even though we're talking a lot about automotive, you're right. It's in all the skilled trades. It's in pretty much anyone that requires, it requires manual labor, really. Cars have changed a lot. They're rolling computers now. Rich, I think you even said that last week. It's basically a rolling computer. I know all three of us own fairly new cars. We're not driving around in something from the 60s or even the 80s. So everything's pretty much controlled by the computer. And if the computer's not working, it turns into a very heavy brick that sits in your driveway. You mentioned going to schools and getting schools on board. You also talked about how not everyone's the same. So one person could be completely happy where they're at. Another person right next to them could be, completely miserable with it. What are the things that you see that need to be done either from an education side or an industry side to help find the right people, get them in the right role? Because to me, where the growth is going to come is going to be in more areas like skilled trades or things that aren't desk intensive. because that, to me, the desk intensive stuff's going to be where we're going to see AI really kind of shine there, because as you point out, it can learn much, much faster than we as humans can.
Yeah. I think general awareness to the public is huge for any skilled trade. I know that's been an emphasis of mine for many years now, and so much so that we've adapted what we're doing at Wrenchway to kind of go that route. We started off as traditional recruiters when I first started Find a Wrench, and then shifted to Wrenchway, which was more job board driven, and then introduced the school piece, where basically we have a platform that allows a streamlined communication between schools and shops to hopefully drive more awareness ultimately to what we're doing, in hopes that they do go down our path, right? And I think when I say in hopes that they go down our path, the one thing I'd correct myself on there is that we've had apprentices even at our own family shop where they come in, or a job shadow, I should say job shadow more likely, where a student will come down and job shadow and leave and say, you know what, this isn't for me. And I weirdly love that, because I don't want somebody coming into our industry that is going to spend all the money on tools and is going to spend all the money on education to come into our industry and be out of it in 2 years, because that does nobody any good, right? Like they just spent a bunch of money on stuff that isn't going to have any ROI on them for their career. So, I think I love the job shadow piece. And I think the earlier we can get to kids and show them, even if a kid wants to become a CPA, I think I look at that as a great thing, because if you bring them in and, hey, you know what, part of this job is I get to look at a lot of businesses and I get to see how they function. That's how some people's brains work. And I think that's really cool. That's my business partner in Wrenchway. He was a CPA. Like, his brain works differently than mine does. And that's a beautiful thing, right? So I think getting kids exposure to work experiences earlier is really, really key, because in a lot of ways, I remember when I went to high school many moons ago, that we didn't really have a lot of structure around job experiences or work experiences other than maybe a part-time job. And the more we can get kids into our businesses and see what they look like and see what they feel like, and every culture is a little bit different, so kind of seeing which ones fit who you are, knowing that the more we can get a young person into a field that they're going to succeed in, the more likely they're going to stay in that field. And so if I have a kid come and job shadow with us and is like, yeah, I don't know if this is for me, I'd rather look at being an electrician. Okay, well, I've got a buddy that's an electrician. Let me call him and see if you can go do the same thing over there, right? Mm-hmm. It's really about, I think, again, going back to the listening part, understanding that just because somebody's enthusiastic about cars doesn't mean they're going to be a good technician, and we shouldn't expect that.
Yeah, I don't think I would have made it as a tech, personally.
I didn't make it as a tech, so
Yeah, it's fun to wrench on them in practice until I get pissed off, and then I'm done. I'm pretty much out there.
Yeah. Then you remember why it costs so much to get your car fixed.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of times it can stink. It can stink to work on them.
Yes, it can. Rich, you got anything else to add to that?
No, I think it's a good point. I think you're absolutely right. I remember being in high school and had absolutely no idea from the high school what I wanted to do. Luckily, I had a cousin who was an accountant, and he had taken me into his office in New York City, and I was mesmerized by being in New York City at, a young age, and that told me I want to do that. So it was kind of easy for me, but I could see where everybody else was like lost. If nobody took them if no one took them under their wing and brought them to something that said, here, check this out, they would have never seen it. So I think to a certain extent, that's a real positive idea that, get people earlier on to understand what is out there. Like that way they're not, because remember, the ones who want to go to college, right, are doing the same thing, and they're taking a blind leap to now a $250,000 to $300,000 education to go do something they don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
That's really scary part. It's expensive. Now you go the other way and you say, look, there's a $100,000 option to go towards the trades, and maybe they've seen it, like you said, and they get the, this isn't for me, or it is for me. And now the $100,000 makes sense because it's an investment in their future. So, there's a lot to be said for what just came out and what we were talking about. It makes a lot of sense. Accountants have been throwing money at this for 20 plus years, and their solution 20 years ago was to make everybody get a master's.
So, what's funny, Rich? What's funny about that? So I've had this conversation with my business partner a million times, and I brought him into our industry, right? And he says what drives him crazy is he went and got his master's degree, and he's like, we still didn't have the expectation levels to perform as a entry level CPA that you guys do in the automotive industry when you put a kid through school for a year or two and expect them to produce right off the bat. He's like, when I came out, I was doing like entry level auditing after getting my master's degree, right? And so you're in school for an extended period of time, learning a lot, and then you're still going through a true training path. And I think what happens a lot of times in the skilled trades is, and I think it's a little more common in other skilled trades, where maybe you'll bring somebody in and you expect them to produce right away without ever really training them on anything, right? Like you might give them a day or two of training and then kind of put them out on their own. And so I look at it, I think our model, the unions, I think sometimes do it better, but like our model is maybe a little outdated there in how we develop young people. And so if you look to Europe and see how they train their technicians, like you go to, say, a Ferrari dealership in Italy, those people are like legends that work on those cars, right? And they work in workshops, and the lead diagnostician is wearing a white lab coat, and like they're seen in a different light than a lot of our technicians are. And it is one of those things where I've put it on our own technicians as well in our industry to say, listen, if you want all of this pay, you want this respect, you want all of this stuff, dress better, be more professional. I see the comments that you post a lot of times on social media. Stop it. Like there's just a lot of things that they could do to bring more professionalism to their own title if they acted in a more intentional manner than just like kind of living off the cuff. And honestly, I was raised in a shop, a lot of swearing and a lot of throwing of wrenches. Like you have to adapt at some point.
You brought up a good point, and I was going to ask, and this is a question for both of you, really. We've talked about one side, which is the business owner or the company. How can they help? What do we need to do to get the kids? And I'm calling them kids because we're pretty much talking about, I'll say, middle school, teenager type people. For the most part, I mean, there's going to be a few 20-somethings in there that are going to have career path changes, but how do we get them to start looking at what they're doing, get them more inquisitive on it? Because I think, we've got kids nowadays that are stuck in their phones or stuck in their tablets. I have a son who is notoriously stuck in his phone or stuck in his tablet. I have a daughter much the same way. My daughter went to college, lasted a year. Fortunately, COVID kind of put the brakes on that, and she finally admitted that that was not what she wanted to do. Of course, she had to spend, $25,000 to do it that first to learn. Fortunately, she didn't spend $125,000 or $225,000, but
which a lot of people do.
A lot of people do. But she figured out what her career path was, and now she's extremely happy doing what she does, and she's starting to build a strong career, and she's going to have good money going for it. I just see where these kids are not, I don't mean to throw the education system under the bus, but they're just not given any practical tools on how to be successful in life. We went from checking the boxes on making sure they have math and English and some basic things, but it just seems like we're missing on that. What are you guys seeing in the education path, and how do we maybe need to change it as parents or as business owners to really get these kids to start looking at things differently?
Rich, I'll let you go first because I feel like I could go on this topic for like 7 straight days.
Well, I do have a thought about it. Like you, Dan, my kids are roughly the same age. My daughter's out of school 5 years, kind of got kicked out by COVID. Um, chased a degree in journalism.
Mm,
Didn't want to do the full broadcasting. She was focused on journalism. And so now you're looking at the fact that nobody reads a newspaper anymore. Nobody
right.
reads a book anymore. Everything's on the tablet. They're getting their news from social media, which is 9 times out of 10 garbage anyway. But, she's trying to figure out, well, now what do I do? I have a degree. Now I have to go and figure out how to adapt. And I haven't even started yet. So I'm adapting from something that never actually began.
Right.
So it's a tough spot to be in. I think that I'm looking at my son, who's now a freshman in college, and wants to go for. He wants to be a radio DJ, and I'm like, okay, Sirius XM, all these things are all taped. They're done how far in advance.
Yeah.
The guys that are the DJs now are the old VJs from MTV.
And most local radio stations are no longer local radio stations.
They're not
I think
local.
you were saying it. They're piped in from somewhere else and they're recorded.
You can do that from wherever. So I'm trying to be different because I learned from my daughter. Now I'm trying to learn for how do I help my son, who now is very interested. The school that he's at has a radio station actually on campus. He's already, set up to be a DJ as early as this week. And
nice.
Am I giving him the right advice? Because I know what happened before. Was it COVID? No. Something accelerated during COVID, not in her favor. But now I don't want the same thing to happen to him. So there's a focus from me. So if I can already tell you that there's a focus from me, the parent who doesn't know anything, according to educators, then the educators got to be doing it too. So I do think there's a massive shift that has to go on. How should the educational system continue to now do it earlier? These kids are smarter than ever. They're way smarter than I ever was at their age. So for me to say that, the education system doesn't have to come down to their level. No, absolutely it does. It has to reach out and hit these kids earlier. So, and I was probably against that because I watched the big 4 accounting firms were talking to people in high schools. They had never done that before. I never saw a big 4 accounting firm in high school. Never at all. No company came to our high school.
Exactly.
So my question becomes, is they came to the colleges, but you're already through the college. You already spent the money. I think it does have to get down to the next level down. I don't know. I'm on a soapbox here a little bit, but I think that the timing is different because the kids are different. They've learned faster. They've learned more on computers. They know more than we did. And now we're saying to them, "Oh, still you need to keep going with the same path that we were on." I have to now admit I don't think that's right. I think we're wrong.
Yep.
It's for me, I think any school of any type would be in their best interest to really think through what is the ROI of this education, right? And so if you are going to a 4-year university, what return is this student going to get out of their money? Or even if they're going to high school or middle school, it's still taxpayer funded. Like what is the ROI of sending a child to school going to be? And are you setting them up for a successful life as an adult, right? And that could come in a personal finance course. That could come in actual technical training. I look at it, I have no idea how we have no requirement for maybe like a consumer education on vehicles, or just how to do the life essentials of knowing what's going on with your house, and like just being able to kind of at least give a base layer of understanding so that you're preparing that student for when they get older. And I think in a lot of cases, and I'll put a little of the blame on the 4-year educators here, is that it was an easy sale for a long time, right? You didn't have to justify the ROI of going to a 4-year university. You just, if some people were going the 4-year route, that's the way they were going. Pick your poison of which route you want to go, but you're coming to this 4-year university. And I think the scary part for a lot of educators right now is we don't know what the world's going to look like in 10 years or 20 years. Like with the advancements in AI, I was just talking to a friend of mine, really close friend of mine who's a surgeon. He said, Jay, the ability for a robot to do surgery could make us extinct in 10 years.
Yeah.
And so when you look at something as advanced as surgery and a robot that is so precise and has recognition capabilities, like just the ability, I mean, they're learning empathy now. Like it's crazy how fast this is advancing. I do feel for educators there because it's almost a moving target as to what they're preparing these kids for. And so when you look at it, I do think this is where the skilled trades have a bit of an advantage in that, if down the road, maybe we are needing people to work with these robots or we're needing them to prepare. And I think if you look at what Elon Musk, I don't know if you guys saw this, what Elon Musk's statement probably a month ago was on the future of AI. He had said at one point that work will be optional for people because basically these robots, the humanoid robots, will be able to supply everything you need and do it where money is no longer relevant. And so he can go out in left field a lot of times, but he's been right a lot on a lot of different things. And so the way he said it was that, if you enjoy gardening, he used this example where if you enjoy gardening, maybe this is very similar to that, where would it be cheaper to go and just buy it from the store than start a whole garden and maintain the garden and, have all the supplies for the garden? Yeah, it would be cheaper just to go buy it. But some people just really enjoy working in their garden.
Right.
He said he feels like jobs are going to be the same way, where it will be optional and that it will help these third world countries be able to develop that. Like, if you haven't listened to the interview, I'd encourage you to do it. It kind of freaks you out a little bit though when you listen to him, because you're like, oh my goodness, this is scary. So as far as like the younger generations and getting them to listen to what we have to say, I do think we have to adapt our messaging a little bit, right? Like if you were to go in and talk to a middle school about career potential earnings, they're not going to care. Like all they want to do is get on PlayStation or, play with their buddies. Like you're not talking their language. Where we had the Wisconsin Auto Truck Dealer Association, actually Minnesota, the Minnesota State Department of Transportation Excellence, one of the hardest acronyms to remember. I did it somehow though. They started this thing called Nitro X, where they go into middle schools with a bunch of RC cars and they get to paint them up. So they show them the collision side of a program, like at a tech school, and then they show them some of the mechanical pieces, and then they build them a racetrack. And then these students get to go race these RC cars around an obstacle course. And the kids absolutely love it. And now you're getting exposure to our industry and to the people in our industry at an earlier age. And then the hope is then you can kind of stoke that fire. So then if they're on the fence of maybe taking that automotive class in high school, then, hey, I actually really liked working on that RC car that day we did it. Okay, like that's maybe a natural progression into our industry. And I think it helps you understand which ones might have the aptitude to do some of that stuff, right? The ones that were good at it and maybe look at this a little differently. So I think the biggest point there is that we've got to learn to speak their language a little bit. And I think traditionally it was, I'm the elder, you listen to me, we're doing it this way. Well, Rich, you were absolutely right. They're different, and that's okay.
Agreed.
You're right. We do have to get the education system to think differently than it is now. And I think we've probably even had this discussion offline that, we throw a lot of money at things, but the money is based on an old system that's outdated, that a lot of these kids aren't effectively learning on anymore anyway. So how do we make that work? I also see, as we're kind of wrapping this up, that somehow we also need to get the parents more engaged. I think the three people that are sitting on this podcast are of a different mindset than a lot of parents are. I just see a lot of parents that are kind of hands off and say, let the education system do what it will. And we've already talked that the education system isn't doing, necessarily the right steps, but somehow we've also got to get the parents to kind of re-engage and coach their children on decisions that they're making. Because I often hear, well, we need more people in the trades. We need more people in automotive. We need more people in this and that. But my kid's going to go to college and do what? As I look at them and ask them that question, and they're like, well, whatever they want. Well, okay, we have plenty of liberal arts degrees that are now sitting there driving cabs and working at McDonald's. What's going to change if you're not going to if it's fine for everyone else, but not fine for your child? And that's where I think, this is the other part of it. So if it's a 3-part equation, it's the business, well, probably 4 parts, the businesses, the schools, the parents, the children. We got to look at it that way. We kind of have to formulate a plan for all of them to get them to see where the value is going to be at in the future. Because, it is a little scary if robots are going to do everything, because
I'm going to go on assuming that it's not going to happen. And if it does, be like, all right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think there's got to be some things that humans need purpose.
Yeah.
So I've coached on this for years. You take the purpose away, and basically when you look at it from a human or psychological side, you see a physical change that happens in an individual when they lose their purpose. And we've seen this manifest in a number of ways, positively and negatively. Some people are able to find a new purpose. Other people become completely lost, and then it degrades into negative, community or individual behavior that's damaging to that person or potentially the people around them. Then my question is, well, okay, if Elon's right, what happens? You pull away everything that gives you purpose, and work, to be honest, for a lot of people gives them purpose. I look at your dad, Jay, and what would he have done if he couldn't wrench on cars?
He'd still wrench on cars. They'd just be older cars.
They'd be older cars. Well, what if he couldn't wrench on older cars, right?
Then he'd be lost. Yeah.
Then he would be lost. And I think, even going through my experience over the last year, when, okay, here's what I'm used to doing. Now I can't do that for 6 months. Drove me absolutely insane. Because, again, you can make phone calls, you can send emails. If nobody responds, you're kind of sitting there spinning your wheels in the mud, and it's just not a pleasant experience. I think that's what we're starting to see manifest within the education system, within the work environment, in various ways that aren't always that positive. So that's where I think we need to look at all 4 corners or all 4 quadrants to say, how do we change the future in the way we communicate, the way we set people up for success and whatnot. And that's going to be an important part of what we do.
Just one point there. Like you were talking about the 4-year schools, and I had a young lady on our podcast, on our Beyond the Wrench podcast, probably a year or 2 ago. Mm-hmm. And she was valedictorian of her class down in Florida, and she wanted to become an automotive technician. She really excelled in their automotive program down there. And her parents said, no, you're going to a 4-year school. And this is different than other stories that I've told where it ultimately was the kid's best interest to come into our field. Their argument was one of the smartest I had heard, which is, we feel like we've got a bright child, and she had proven that. She's great at everything she did. And they pushed her to a 4-year school. And their argument for it was, we never want her to get to a point in her career to where she could be lined up to be a CEO of a company someday, or she could be at a high level position. And because she doesn't have the 4-year degree, she's not able to do that position. Right. And so her parents were already kind of looking out for her future. You could tell she was raised really, really well. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was the best argument for a 4-year degree, was that, hey, at some point it could hold you back. So even if you start off as a technician and you work your way up to a service manager, then a general manager, and then maybe you're working you're working for corporate at some point, like you start working your way up the ladder, it can handcuff you if you don't have that. And so they were still thinking along those ways. It is still a little old fashioned, but it's also probably pretty true. Like if you're going to be running a big company someday, you probably still want to go that route. So it is, I think a lot of it is just understanding where you think your capabilities are, where your career could lead to. And again, I say this about technicians all the time. We're very guilty of putting them all in one bucket and thinking that every path is going to be the same. What I think we could do the best for these young people is give them to exposure to as many things as we possibly can at an early age, so they can kind of understand, hey, that looks pretty cool, and I'm interested in that. And when I'm on my tablet, this is what I'm looking at YouTube at, and like, just trying to figure out what their interests are and guide them down that path to what's going to have the most potential to make them successful.
That right there is some sound advice, and I think that's a good place to kind of wrap this up with. Jay, if there are parents or even older kids that are looking to find their way within the automotive industry, tell us a little bit more about Wrenchway and how you guys can help them out.
Yeah, we've got this new ASE Connects program that Wrenchway is running for ASE. If you go to wrenchway.com, you can kind of get all of the details there. If you're an educator or a school that's looking for some help, go out there. We don't charge schools anything for anything that we do. So everything's free for schools. Industry pays a membership to be a part of it. Pretty cool program, and we've seen a lot of growth with it. It's exciting for me because I do think we're really touching not only the next generation, but compiling data to be able to help the current generations as well.
Excellent. And to find you is just wrenchway.com, correct?
Wrenchway.com. Or if anybody wants to add me on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. Feel free to go out and add me. And if as Dan probably knows better than Rich, but I'll talk to you about pretty much anything. So if you come out and start a conversation, I'll be sure to respond.
That is true. That is true. All right. Thanks, Jay. Rich, how do they get a hold of us if they have things they want to fix, especially those business owners? Can't help the kids that much, but we can always try.
The best way to reach me is by email at rich@xcxo.net.
And you can reach me at dan@xcxo.net. Jay, thanks for joining us. This has been a great conversation, and appreciate your insight into all these changes that are happening in the world and getting an outside perspective on it. So thanks again.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you having me back on.
All right, Bob, take it away.
Thanks for listening to Books and the Biz. If today's conversation sparked new ideas for your company, the team at XCXO can help you turn those ideas into action. XCXO brings together seasoned executives, fractional CEOs, COOs, CFOs, and CXOs who step into your business with the experience, strategy, and leadership to drive real results. Whether you're trying to scale, strengthen operations, improve profitability, or prepare for transition, our experts help you move faster and lead with confidence. To learn more or start a conversation, visit xcxo.net. That's xcxo.net, your shortcut to stronger leadership and a better run business. Thanks again for joining us.